Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to today's live stream, an alternative approach to business development. I'll just give you some time to come in. I'm incredibly excited. We've had almost 200, in fact, 240 of you have signed up for this. So I'm excited to share a wealth of information that I have for you this morning. So do come in. It's not quite 11 o'clock. It is 1 minute to. So do come in. And as you come in, let me know where you're joining from, what part of the world, what company you're joining from. Would love to hear more about you. So do let me know in the chat. I can see all your comments. So before we get into it, do let me know where you're joining from, what companies you are joining from. Would love to know. And in the meantime, I'm just going to check LinkedIn to make sure that you can all see me. Do let me know if you can see me. Do let me know if you can see me in the chat box. Do let me know if you can see me. Do let me know if you can see me. And I think you can because I can see myself on here. So, excellent. Hi, Tom. Welcome. Head of sales from Boston Air. Welcome to you this morning. Like I said, I've got a wealth of information to share with you. How I normally run these lives is I'll share some slides with you. I'll share the information, then we'll have a Q&A at the end. You can ask me anything that you want. I always say that this is the only time that you get to pick my brain for free. And honestly, I'm at your service this morning. I'm absolutely honored that so many of you have joined up, signed up for this. Those that will attend live, those of you that will join via the replay. Great to have you here, Clive. Thank you for confirming that. So what I'm going to do is I am going to share my screen with you so you can see my slides. Let's share my screen. Okay. And do let me know if you can see those slides. Can you see those slides? Okay, perfect. So let's get into this. So today I want to talk to you about an alternative approach to business development, And we're going to get into why I thought this was an important topic to cover, why I think this is an important topic to cover. So we're talking about business development and how to strengthen the sales support process, So let me just make sure I can move these slides across. I'm working on multiple screens. So, okay, I think you can see that. So today we're going to talk about why an alternative approach to business development is even required, why I think it's time to re-look at why we need an alternative approach, why we need to look at the sales process in aerospace, and why we need to look at the way we do business development in the sector. The next thing I want to talk to you about is this friction that I've acknowledged that has prevented progress in the area of business development. So there's this friction that I want to talk to you about. And, as we go through this, I really want to hear your opinions at the end as well. If I say anything and you think, actually, I don't agree, then feel free to chime in. And if you do agree, do the same. I really like these lives to be interactive. It's an opportunity for us to really engage. And then I want to talk to you about the role of business development in the current climate, because we all know the industry is changing. Some things have stayed the same, but it is changing radically. And then the business development blueprint for aerospace that I've put together, which I'm guessing is one of the main reasons many of you are joining this morning. So, my name is Katrina Douglas. For those of you that don't know me, I've been a marketer since 2006, so nearly 2 decades, and I've helped companies of all sizes increase their marketing effectiveness and commercial capability. I was chartered for 10 of those years. And then, a few years ago when I decided to launch my own business, I relinquished membership, but I was chartered for a number of years, a whole decade. And I have developed a proprietary framework, which is the 6P launch framework, which has been featured in a number of publications. So I've been doing this a very, very long time, and a little bit of background as to why I even decided to enter the sector. So I started my business in 2016 properly, and then I was consulting and providing marketing strategy development for companies across sectors. In 2019, I decided to niche down and focus just on helping companies launch to their next level of success, next level of growth. So that was startups, that was organizations that were established and wanted to grow. Maybe they were scaling internationally, maybe they were launching new products. And then the third group were organizations that were getting to exit. So they needed to reposition and attract investment. So I further niched down in last year. In fact, at the end of 2021, something quite pivotal for me happened. And Cranfield University, many of you will know the impact that Cranfield has in aviation, and they invited me to do a scale up program for them in aviation. For the first time, I realized what an opportunity aviation and aerospace was, and that there was also a gap in the area of sales and marketing that I realized I could fill. For those prior, I guess at that point, I would have been in marketing, I guess 15, 16 years. And prior to that, I never had the desire to niche down into a sector. For most of my corporate career, I worked in tech. When I left, I just opened it up to all sectors. And that was the first time in my life that I felt passionate about a sector to actually niche my entire business. And so in January, I literally changed my website. I changed my positionings to do what I've been doing for the last 15, 16 years, solely for the aerospace sector. I spent most of last year understanding the sector, researching the sector, and building relationships to make sure that what I wanted to offer and what I wanted to bring to this sector added value. So that is enough about me. That is enough about me. But I think it's important that we establish why the sector is different, because one thing I realized, although that I have a wealth of experience in sales and marketing, I also realized that a cookie cutter approach would not work. The industry is too nuanced, it's too niche to just bring a cookie cutter approach. And so, although I realized that there needed to be greater innovation and effectiveness in the area of marketing and sales, I also realized that I couldn't just bring what I've been doing in other sectors to your sector. So I think that the first thing I wanted to do is go through those differences to provide context. And you will all know what these differences are. But to provide context to the blueprint, I think it's worth going through what those key differentiators are. So the first thing is highly skilled and niche. There is such a wealth of deep, deep knowledge in the sector, and which lends itself to the depth of conversation that needs to be had. The level of skill takes years and years to acquire. And I'm always fascinated by how talented the workforce is within the sector. And so it's really important that marketing messaging speaks to that. But at the same time, what I've also acknowledged is the marketing messages is sometimes unrefined. So I've gone to a lot of events over the years, over the last 18 months within the sector. And I first acknowledged it, realized it at the Farnborough Air Show last year. And it was that there was this sea of component manufacturers that seemed undifferentiated. Now, I appreciate that if you're in the space, you know the space well enough to know who does what. But if someone coming into the sector, or if someone is even in the sector and looking to know how a component manufacturer is differentiated, it's very, very difficult to see that off the surface. So last week I was also at DSEI. Many of you may have been there as well. And I noticed it again. DSEI had some phenomenal stands. The primes, did a great job with their stands, as they always do, but also a lot of emerging companies had great stands. But one thing that was consistent across the board was that if I spoke to two people on the stand, they would give me two different definitions of what the business does, why it does it, and why I should be listening to them and who their audience is exactly. So there's this, because there is so much focus on engineering talent and engineering capability, there is a gap in commercial capability that is evident whenever I go to these events and stands out to me like a sore thumb. So that is a great thing about your sector, the highly skilled essence of it. But from a comms perspective, it's also problematic because it requires simplifying your messaging, which takes a certain skill, which is missing. So the other thing is that you have a very closed community. And so one of the things that I was flabbergasted by was the fact that um, there is so much talent, there is so much ingenuity, there is so much innovation, but no one outside of aerospace and aviation knows about it. Unless you're in the sector, nobody really knows about it. If you go to websites of many of your companies, again, it doesn't scream loud enough about what it is you do, why you make a difference in terms of your communications mix. It's quite closed. Everybody knows each other, which is great. I think as someone that is relatively new to the sector, I found that really embracing and really heartening, the amount of in-person events you have and how close-knit the community is. But it's also problematic because those outside the sector have no idea what's happening. And also there's companies within the sector that are doing great work that aren't visible, which is hampering their growth and potential. So the other thing is that the long-term programmatic planning. And so it's not easy. And what I mean by that is, so for example, when people order aircrafts, it takes years, they take years to be delivered. Innovation in new space takes years to come about. And so we're not talking about short time scales. And so when you have those long projects and long time frames, you have to maintain a narrative over an extended period of time. You have to keep communication interesting and relevant over that period of time. And that's not always easy to do. It's not always easy to keep your message relevant and compelling. And so, again, it goes back to that insular nature of the sector, that a lot of times that work isn't done. You just focus on the engineering capability, you focus on the project, and that has worked up until now to a degree. But as the industry evolves, it becomes necessary to do things differently. We're seeing the emergence of new space. We're seeing the introduction of AI. We're seeing barriers to entry decrease. And so all those things mean that although barriers to entry remain high and will always be high relative to other sectors, they are eroding. And the level of competition is increasing. And so even though many of your organizations have been around for 30, 40 years, that narrative is moving to the point where it's not enough, because length of time in an industry does not necessarily mean now that you have a competitive advantage, or that competitive advantage is as strong as it used to be. And it doesn't mean that new entrants can't erode that, which is why one of the huge reasons why this new approach to business development and sales is required. So then we have, the fact that the industry is driven by public policy, strategy, and programs. And so the industry tends to communicate for compliance, not commercial growth, because you're communicating to demonstrate that you're in line with a lot of these initiatives. We've seen the new space strategy. We've seen the push towards sustainability and alternative fuel, and all of that stuff. And much of that is geared toward public policy and strategy. And so there's an element of communication that is more driven towards commercial capability and marketing and sales that is sometimes missing, because that is all consuming, and understandably so. The other thing is that there is a dependence on R&D and grants. So although, it's a complex thing, because you're having to communicate to multiple stakeholders simultaneously. And so another big thing here, and this is something that someone that I greatly admire in the industry said to me recently, he said that actually when you go for these R&D grants, there is no provision for sales and marketing. And so it means that the money that you're given often has to go towards R&D. And so there's not always the money to actually invest in sales and marketing and give it a try. And because of also the perception around the benefits of sales and also marketing sometimes as well. Like I said, like I continue to say, the focus tends to be on engineering. Also this notion of public procurement. There's established methods of procurement. So actually, and excuse the typo there. So actually, it's unlike other sectors where there often needs to be these big awareness campaigns and big marketing campaigns and big sales initiatives to get the message out. A lot of your companies are already entrenched in established procurement processes, and so the need for that is sometimes perceived as not as much. But what that means is when you're overly focused on procurement or the projects that you have running in primes, it means that not only are you over reliant on one stream of revenue, no matter how huge they are, but it also means that you're missing out on opportunities. You're over reliant on these, and so you're missing out on opportunities. And the focus is in one direction when actually new incumbents are looking at the industry from a completely fresh perspective. And the opportunity for them is to come in undetected and take territory that you thought you occupied, because you're so entrenched in established procurement process, and that's always going to be important. But as I said, the market is changing, so a bigger lens is required. And this is why at places like the DSEI, you see a number of new incumbents, particularly in new space, particularly in AI, and they've come in and they've seemingly come in from nowhere and made a big splash, and they're actually generating significant revenue because they're doing things differently and seeing things differently. Of course, there's regulatory requirements, and so it's about how to raise the profile of a business to accelerate commercial growth and still maintain those regulatory requirements, because of course they are crucial. They are crucial. And then you have the power of the primes. So the primes pretty much rule the industry. And they are indeed great at what they do. But what that means is that the balance of power means that sales activity can be more reactive than proactive, because you're reacting to what the primes need. You're reacting to what the public sector needs are. Meanwhile, that more reactive activity to ensure commercial sustainability and commercial growth in other areas isn't there, because activity tends to be more reactive and proactive. And then, of course, you have complex supply chains. And which means that it's difficult to pinpoint decision makers and even target audiences for comms activity. And then these are big, massive projects. A lot of times you're dealing with huge amounts of money, huge upfront costs, and the stakes for failure are often high. So often that there's this culture of caution in the sector that says it is better to stay a little quiet, and not to get too loud. Money is better spent on engineering than marketing and sales. And the problem is there is no point of having great technology that no one knows about, right? And to grow the industry and to grow the sector, it's just so important that your sales activity spreads to the regions that it needs to, that the visibility of your companies are where they need to be to move into this next season of growth. So I want to summarize all that. And this is just to provide context to why an alternative approach is required before we get into what that approach should be. And so the first is there's this point of friction. And the first point of friction is the fact that there's this need for innovation, but there's this culture of compliance, caution, and conformity. And so there is a need to communicate in a way that is, doesn't give too much away sometimes, that is conducive to the culture in the industry, but you still need to move the industry forward. Governments are still requiring for innovation. Primes still need innovation. And so it's balancing that friction between the caution that is so cultural in the sector and this new need for innovation. And so to really meet that need and satisfy that friction, there needs to be a new approach, because you're trying to do things that are almost counterintuitive, which is why it doesn't get done. And which is why, when you compare the business development in aviation and aerospace compared to other sectors like tech and any other sector, to be fair, it seems light years ahead in engineering, but backwards in terms of commercial capability, because there's this need to reconcile this friction, but actually there isn't the energy to do it, there isn't the motivation to do it. And to date, there hasn't really been, because of the structure of the sector, the real need to do that. But that is changing. That is changing. The second point of friction is that there's a need for messaging that satisfies the complexity of the industry, but is simple enough to convince and convert all stakeholders. And so you have the stakeholders like primes and local governments that need that degree of complexity. You have engineers that need that level of complexity, but then you have new and additional audiences like public acceptance in spaces like eVTOL. You are only going to get so far without public acceptance, and so you need those messages around public acceptance. You also need to perhaps attract investment from investors outside of the sector that are suddenly attracted to aerospace and new space. And they require simplicity. They require simple messages. But because the industry is complex, there is friction around that. So how do you stay true and communicate with those people that need that degree of complexity, but also keep your message compelling and simple enough to drive action from people that need less simplicity, from stakeholders that need less simplicity? How do you do that? The third point of friction is that there is a need to drive social and political good, but also make and profit and recoup high costs. And so, because a lot of times there is grant funding, because there is oftentimes social and political initiatives around the R&D and around the drives for innovation, there is this need to demonstrate that you are satisfied those things. But actually, as for-profit business, there is a need to recoup those high costs. And so there is a need for commercial models and business development approaches that can do that effectively. And so what I'm hoping that you're seeing now is that there is a skill shortage in the sector, but it's not just engineering and MRO. It's not just in engineering and MRO. It is in the area of commercial capability, and it is in the area of sales and marketing. It is in the area of sales and marketing as well. And so part of why my business exists in the sector, part of me doing this LinkedIn Live this morning, is to shed some light on that and provide some answers to some of the issues that I have raised thus far, So, what is the role of business development in the current climate? And many of you joining are business development professionals, are sales professionals as well. And I'm just going to flick back to my other screen to see your comments. I will come back to all of your comments. So what is the role of business development in the current climate? And I'm interested at this juncture to hear your thoughts on this as well. So what is the role of business development? And the first, from my perspective, it's to cultivate relationships. It is because the industry is built around relationships. There's some things that will never be spoken about in public domains. And unlike other sectors, digital marketing and digital comms has less weight because of the nature of your work, because of the complexity of your work. And so it's always going to be important to cultivate those relationships. And from my perspective, that's where often the focus is, which is a good thing. But I think that moving into this next phase is not enough. And it's absolutely not enough. So the next thing is to drive business growth. The third thing is to track new clients and partners. The fourth thing is to explore new opportunities. And the fifth thing is to drive sales. So there are some principles that will prevail. Like I've said, um, in-person events will always be huge in the sector. Industry bodies and the marketing and promotion and sales activities they do will always be paramount in the sector because of the nature of the sector and the complexity in it. However, although certain principles will remain, ultimately old ways don't work in new seasons. And so a new approach is required because the only thing consistent is change. And we know that. And we absolutely know that. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and come back on your screen and see. Can you all see me? I think you should be able to see me. And so I would absolutely like to hear your views on, as business development professionals, as many of you are, what is the scope of your roles? And are there any differences? Are there any things that I haven't mentioned that you deem part of that business development role? Would love to hear your thoughts. Would love to hear your thoughts. Don't be shy. Let me know in the comments. Okay. And I'm going to bring up a dual screen as we move into the business development the business development blueprint. So I'm going to share my slides. Okay, bear with me a second. Don't be shy in the comments. Let me know what you think. And I'm going to bring up a dual screen so you can see both me and the slides. Okay. So let's talk about this business development blueprint. So far we have established why the industry is different, why a new approach is required, the friction that exists, and now we're going into the business development blueprint. So an approach that I believe can help reinvigorate business development, help you take an alternative approach and really add value to all those things that business development professionals do. So everything from driving growth to cultivating relationships, and all of that stuff. So Tom, I think what you were saying makes sense. I do find the industry is open to talking to other professionals in the industry. Absolutely. I do my best to create content and make posts about what we do in aviation. Let me just share. This is a nice juncture, actually. Let me put some of your posts up. So Tom, I think you are saying makes sense. I do think the industry open to talking to other professionals in the industry. And I agree with you, Tom. You know, I think the openness is there, but oftentimes if people come to you, and that's what I love about the sector. And everyone I've done a lot of outreach and I've had to build relationships from scratch over the last 18 months. And every person that I've spoken to in the sector has been so open and generous with their time and information. And it has been a joy to experience, but it's still in a closed environment. So unless you go to the sector, there is little proactive or relatively little proactive efforts to be visible to the wider business sector. For example, I have been in business and in marketing, like I said, for the best part of nearly 2 decades now. And I'm connected on LinkedIn to probably, I guess, just over 7,000 people. And prior to going into aviation and aerospace, pretty much no one at any industry events that I went to, no one that I was connected was really talking about aviation and aerospace, really knew about the sector, understood that there's, the UK is a massive space hub, that places like Harwell are the only places on the planet with 100 space companies in walking distance, that Cranfield University is doing great things with hydrogen. just nobody knows. And I think if they did, the amount of energy around the sector and force the sector would be so much. I even look at issues like diversity and young people coming up in the sector. There's this push to have for STEM, but actually, a lot of those engineers coming up don't realize what the opportunity in aerospace is, which is feeding into the skills gap that we have. And so I absolutely agree, Tom, but I'm so excited about aerospace and aviation and new space that I really just want the whole world to know what a phenomenal industry it is, why we need even more money and energy to come into the sector, because the sector does deserve it. You're among the most brilliant minds I've ever come across, and nobody knows, or very relatively few people know, that the industry exists. And so thank you so much for that, Tom. Really appreciate that. And Benedict, so I do my best to create content and make posts about what we do in aviation, about my own personal experience at events, so that others can learn from me, get to know more about what I do and why I do. Absolutely. And the more of us that continue to do that, the better. The more of us that continue to leverage channels like LinkedIn, the better. And I'll give you some insights. Many of you are obviously on here, so you know about LinkedIn, but again, there's much more that you could be doing with the platform as well. I know a lot of people don't know that you can even do LinkedIn live events and LinkedIn audio events like this, for example, but there's so many features that LinkedIn has that I think would work very well for the sector that I don't see being leveraged that often. So let's see. Yes, I'm always found in general, given a fair hearing. Key moving forward, I think, is understanding what else we can offer and differentiate. Absolutely, Tom. Absolutely, absolutely. So let's get into this blueprint. And so I like to keep things super, super simple. And the thing about simplicity is that you have to go through a level of complexity to get to it. But ultimately, that's the goal, because people don't buy, people don't make decisions, people don't galvanize around ideas unless if they're confused. And so clarity is always important, and that comes from simplicity. So the first thing in the blueprint is messaging and marketing positioning. And so it's clarity around that. What I find is a lot of companies, even if you've been in the industry for a very, very long time, you struggle to simplify that message. There's a struggle around communicating what you do in simple terms, and in concise terms, because it is so complex. And so it actually takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to narrow down your market positioning, to narrow down your messaging. But if you can do it, it's absolutely gold, and it puts you head and shoulders above, other companies, because very few people can do it. And like I said, when I was at DSEI the other day, last week, and this company had this great stand. I mean, I had to actually ask them who did their stand and who came up with the concept. It was that good. And yet I speak to one of the salespeople, and they probably spend a good 5-10 minutes trying to explain to me what they do. And I end up saying, oh, digital transformation, 2 words. And they say, yes, that's a big part of it. But I mean, it's, and I see that. And every stand I went to, it was the same thing. What could have been said in 2 minutes was taken 10 minutes, because they know what their company does, but they don't know how to communicate it in a concise and compelling way. And so some work needs to be done there. And I'm going to provide you with a simple framework. So if I tell you what we do as a company, quite simply is this. We help aviation and aerospace companies increase their commercial capability and marketing effectiveness so that they are more profitable, scalable, and resistant to market change. Okay? Fairly simple. We work with aerospace companies. We help increase marketing effectiveness and commercial capability. And the reason we do that is so that your companies can be more profitable, scalable, and resistant to market change. Okay? The framework for that you can apply to all your business is this. We do X for Y in order to achieve Z. Okay? So what do you do? What is the X? So in the same way that I said, we help, we increase commercial capability and marketing effectiveness. What is that thing that you do? Not that thing that you necessarily sell, but what do you do? What is that thing that you do? Who do you do it for? Because yeah, who do you do it for? What are the characteristics of those decision makers? Who do you actually do it for? Why does your business exist? And what is the purpose of it? What are you helping people to achieve? Now, if you can just nail that down, like I said, it takes a long time to get it that precise and accurate and sufficient to convey what you do, but try it. Try that framework and it will make your networking, it will make your sales collateral, it will make everything easier for you to communicate. So I encourage you to try and pin that down. That's the first thing that you want to be doing. You want to be refining your messaging and marketing positioning and making sure it's right and making sure it connects with those stakeholders that you need it to connect to. Okay. So that's the first thing. The second thing is outbound and inbound communications. And so a lot of activity I see is outbound. And what I mean by that, you're actively going to events, you're actively finding prospects, you're actively building relationships. And that is great. That needs to continue. Long may that live. But what is missing is that inbound. So I was speaking to someone else at DSEI last week. And they said the problem is there's so many different stakeholders and decision makers. We don't always know who to target, okay? We don't know who we should be speaking to in these organizations. And often that is the case. So what you need to do is become a magnet so they come to you. And here's what I mean. About a month or two ago, I had someone that wasn't even connected to me contact me on LinkedIn. A company that is now a client of mine, in fact, in aerospace. And they said, I need someone in marketing, and I think you're the person, essentially. I never would have found them. They had to have found me because I never would have found them. We're not connected. I didn't know the company existed. But the point is, my ecosystem, my marketing ecosystem is such that it attracts people to it. And you all that are here today are an example of that. Many of you did not know who I was, had never heard of my company. I've never reached out to you directly. And yet over 240 of you signed up for this. And you didn't know me. I don't know many of you personally. It was inbound, right? And so you have to become a magnet when you don't know who the decision makers are, when you don't know who you really need to be speaking to. You need to create content. You need to create marketing communications that becomes a magnet so that you draw them out. And then once you've drawn them out and you know who they are, you can then go back to outbound with more relevant, more specific messages. And so you absolutely need both. You absolutely need both. You absolutely need both. Okay. And so outbound and inbound. Okay. And LinkedIn is a great tool for that. The next thing is relationship building and relationship management. You are all phenomenal at relationship building. From my experience, you don't have a problem with relationship building. That is entrenched in the industry, okay? But where there is a weakness is relationship management. A lot of relationships are held with key people of influence within your organization. And so often there aren't robust customer relationship management systems where even if a person leaves or sadly may pass away or retires, a lot of the relationships are held with those individuals. So when those individuals move on, whether it be owners of companies, business development directors, or professionals, a lot of that goes with them. And so there needs to be robust relationship management processes and systems. And the same level of systemization that we see in engineering and project management needs to be applied in the area of sales and business development. And so there is definitely growth for relationship management and really having the details around those relationships in a central system, and so that you don't have bottlenecks in the organization, that regardless of whether a person leaves, yes, it will always be a loss, but to a lesser degree because you have the information, you have the conversations, you have everything that surrounded that in a central place. And there is also, I've also noted that there is a number of mergers and acquisitions and a lot of sales that happen in the sector. And so when someone is looking to acquire a business, they want to know how much of that intellectual property, how much of that relationship is held within the business versus in someone's mind or in someone's Rolodex, you know? And so the more of that you have embedded in the business and within a central secure system, the better and more valuable your organization becomes. And so also expansion of channels. Again, a lot of it, this is built around event. A lot of the industry is built around events. A lot of it is built around, you know, industry bodies, which is great, but there is so much more that could be done. A lot of the industry bodies have industry publications, really compelling editorial pieces, advertorial pieces that are part advert, part education, LinkedIn, more lives, more webinars, more content on LinkedIn platforms, email marketing, a systemized process for nurturing leads and existing client relationships. So an expansion of channels is required. Podcasts, and I've seen some great ones in the sector, in fact, but not enough. And so an expansion of channels to increase your reach and to increase visibility is required as well. The optimization of existing channels. When I look at a lot of websites in the sector, a lot of the websites are brochureware. And I understand why that is, because a lot of information is proprietary. A lot of times we're under non-disclosure agreements, so there's only so much we can disclose publicly, and people do not buy from websites in the aerospace sector. But they can do more to support the sales support process. There's a lot of websites, for example, where there is no lead capture forms and no way that, you know, people can submit their information and maybe download something or get something in return. You know, a lot of times the information on the website is very much speaks to the product and the service you offer, but doesn't speak enough to the audience and doesn't connect enough with them. There is so much more websites could be doing as a tool to support the sales and business development process. So optimizing the channels that you do use, having strategy around events that you do attend. So, okay, you're attending, you might be attending an event, and tomorrow, for that, some of you, if any of you are at the Royal Aeronautical Society's President's Summit, would love to meet you in person there tomorrow. But it's things like, if you are going to that, is there a strategy around it? Are there particular people that you want to meet there? What does your pre-event activity look like? Are you outreaching prior to the event? When you go to the event, do you know what particular message you want to communicate to people? You know, what is your post-show event? How are you going to maximize the value of the event? Because these events are not cheap to attend, right? And so, yes, we want relationships, and yes, those relationships take time, and yes, we don't all want to go like a bull in the china shop selling our wares. But also, there does need to be some strategy, some more robust strategy around the events that we attend, when we attend them, and what we want to get out of them. Push and pull. And so, again, this ties into outbound and inbound, but as well as pushing your information and sales messages and your proposition, it's what I said before, it's pulling people to you, pulling your ideal clients, pulling even the press, pulling people to you, pulling those stakeholders to you, pulling the public, pulling ideal clients to you, so that actually the cost of acquisition becomes less, but also you know, you're getting more revenue for the same or even less effort. And so it's really optimizing and increasing efficiency, not just on the engineering side, but also on the commercial side. So having a push and pull relationship, actually pulling and attracting the right people to your organization. And as you can see, these things, they may sound simple, but a lot of times they're not done. And like I said, you know, marketing and sales strategy, business development strategy doesn't need to be complex, but it does need to be effective, and it does need to be efficient, and it does need to get better over time, because that's what growth does. And so, like I said, it's push and pull. And then finally, it's a sales funnel. It's having a system to of attracting sales. So not just going to events, having great conversations and leaving it there, hoping something comes of it, maybe sending a follow-up email, but having a systemized process of sales. And this LinkedIn Live, although it's not about me, really overly selling to you, is part of a sales funnel. And so for me, my sales funnel, to give you an example, is outreach. So that might be events, that might be via Sales Navigator, which is a business development tool that LinkedIn has. And then it's about connection. So then it's about genuinely connecting with people on LinkedIn. So often I will send people connection requests, and I do not sell directly either, directly to them. Many of you have been connected to me that way, and probably can vouch that we may have been connected for a while, but I have not sold to you. I haven't been in your DMs. It's very much about bringing you all into my ecosystem and adding value, because I always believe that you should give before you receive. And so it's about bring connection. And then it's about content. It's about demonstrating capability. It's about demonstrating your knowledge of the sector, and that, your awareness and knowledge of who your ideal clients are and their business and how you work. Because ultimately, people don't care about who we are as a business or as companies. They care about what they need, and rightly so. I want you all to care about, be more focused on what you need to move your business forward than you are on who I am and what my business does. The synergy comes when what you need marries with what I provide. And that's where the conversation lies. And so it's about having content that communicates that. It's about having business development activity that communicates that. And then, so it's outreach, it's connection, it's content. And then for me, often after that, it's a sales call. So after people have been in my ecosystem for a while, then I reach out to them. And even then, it's just a soft approach. And so yours may be different. And for many of my clients, it is. But it's important to have a systemized process to get leads and consistent business into the business. And I know, again, the sector is different in the sense that you all don't need huge numbers of clients. You absolutely don't. But you do need, every company needs a consistent flow of clients, even if you don't need that many. And there is an increasing number of companies that require many of your services, and they need to know about you too. And so that is the blueprint. That is the blueprint. And I'm going to get to some of your comments in a second. And so here we have what we've just gone through. The blueprint is more ops, as in more opportunities. You follow this business development blueprint, you apply it to what you're doing, and you will have more opportunities. You will stand a stronger chance of increasing profitability. You will stand a better chance of being resistant to market change, and you will be primed for growth. So that is absolutely the blueprint. So now I'm now going to look at your comments. So Kevin, you say agree with that. Originally came from a different industry and was amazed how exciting aviation is, yet little is known. Absolutely. It's flabbergasting when you come from another sector and you realize how rich the industry is. It's galvanizing, and it's also very, very surprising. And I think, marketers like us, Kevin, and business development and sales professionals, we can do a lot of work to change that. We absolutely can. So Tom, you have a recommendation, a tool called CH Aviation to find decision makers at airlines. Provide email data and LinkedIn reference. I love that. Thank you for that, Tom. And I would also recommend Sales Navigator. Sales Navigator on LinkedIn as well is also pretty good. It's also pretty good for that. And so, Yusuf, let me answer your question. May I ask, in your opinion, about the other platforms such as Locatory, Partspace, and ILS? I am not aware of those platforms, Yusuf. I'm not aware of those platforms, but I will look into them. I will look into them. And yeah, in a future live, I will be able to provide you feedback with that. So let's go to your next question. Shall we spend the same effort and time in the mentioned platform, same as LinkedIn? That's a question I couldn't answer for you. I wouldn't say I wouldn't special I wouldn't what's the word I'm looking for? Specify time frame. What I would say is that a certain amount, a good chunk of your time should be spent on these activities. Whether it's less about the platform or more about the activity. It's more about the tactics you're employing. It's more about your approach. So less about the time and specific platforms, because again, and maybe that's you've given me an idea for a future life. Perhaps maybe we can talk about that in more detail. We can go into specific platforms and even the ones I use in my business. But yeah, I wouldn't prescribe a time. I would say it's more about the quality of your activity than it is about the quantity of your activity. That it is about the quantity, the actual platforms that you're on. Do we have any questions? Do we have any questions? So Tom, in my experience, it's a mix of direct content via email and also LinkedIn that generate the best results. Yep, absolutely. I practically live on LinkedIn. And because I didn't have any kind of contacts or direct relationships, I had that Sales Navigator has been gold for me. That was the only way that I knew to attract clients. And it's so rich. So it gives you data about the company, it gives you their growth stats, it gives you key decision makers. And then what I would do is I make a direct approach, and then following something that, it naturally requires an email address. And then we take the conversation from there. But so I use LinkedIn alongside a CRM system, and I use one called Capsule, which is very simple. You don't need something that is hugely complex, especially if you're just starting one out. You just need a CRM system. So I use Capsule, and the starting package is absolutely free. And so I will build relationships on LinkedIn. Once we've had a conversation and we're both comfortable with each other to exchange email addresses, I then move over to a customer relationship management system, and I log all our conversations. I log all our interactions. I set reminders to contact and reach out. I put specific notes around things that they may have said that may not even be related to business, maybe a birthday, maybe an anniversary. And so those are all important notes for me to reach out and say hi. And again, it's all about adding value and showing genuine interest in people as well, which you all know as sales and business development professionals. And I think, it's people, even when I looked at the numbers for this LinkedIn live, for me, I just felt like, wow, that's actually, over 240 actual people. Imagine those people in a room. And so for me, it's always about relating to people, not just as prospects, not just as someone that can buy from you, but as just actual individuals that are multifaceted. And so that's another thing that I want to say to you about business development and your sales processes. It has to meet people at the head and the heart. And I know a lot of the people and decision makers are more head, they're engineers, they're techies, they're technically minded. But also your message also has to compel them at that heart level as well. They have to want to do business with you. They have to be convinced. They have to be excited. Not necessarily excited. Some people aren't excitable. But the point is, although don't be so over focused on the tech side of things and the engineering and the complexity that you miss the humanity in your messaging, and the way you connect with people. So, let's see, what else do you have, Benedict? I've noticed that for some geographies and countries, that decision makers and those in the aviation sector don't really use LinkedIn or similar tools. Absolutely, that is true. That is true. Which is why, for me, it's so important to go to industry events. As well, and to show up in person, because you're right, there's a lot of people that don't use LinkedIn, and even if they are on LinkedIn, they're not regularly actually present on LinkedIn, which is why you do have to have something in addition to LinkedIn. And for me, that's events. So in the next, I think this month alone, so I was at DSCI last week, and that the Royal Aeronautical President Summit tomorrow. Then I'm at the Midlands Aerospace Alliance black tie dinner on Thursday. And then next week, I believe on the 26th, I'm at Drone X as well. And so you have to be in these places. And that's why it's about having, like I said, expanding your marketing mix, expanding your mix as well. Because you're right, there is no one place that everyone is going to be. But the industry bodies are great because pretty much everyone in the sector is connected to one or more industry bodies. So they're also great. And a huge shout out to Midlands Aerospace Alliance. They have been absolutely phenomenal. So if you're not a member, definitely do check them out and connect with them as well. They have lots of things going on. So do we have any more comments, any more feedback, any more comments, any more feedback? So I am going to put my contact details on the screen. Let me hide this comment and move myself so that you can see me. You can't see me rather. So if you want to email me directly, if you're not connected to me on LinkedIn, I think most of you are, but if you're not, please do connect with me first and foremost. Feel free to comment, feel free to direct message me. And I'm always happy to help and answer any questions that you have, even if you didn't want to submit them live, or you might be watching the replay. And so, I don't have the opportunity to answer those questions live. So feel free to direct message me. Also, feel free to email me at katrina@thelaunchstrategist.com. My inbox is open. Do visit thelaunchstrategist.com and see the wealth of information we have about what we do there and how we can help you. We also have a LinkedIn, a YouTube channel as well. And so I produce a number of videos for YouTube as well. This video will actually be on our YouTube channel as well. And the link to that is on our website, but you can just search the Launch Strategist on YouTube. And then finally, if you want to book a 15-minute consult with me, go ahead and do that. So that's site.thelaunchstrategist.com/15-minute consult. So it's there on your screen. Do feel free to book an appointment with me in my calendar. I keep a number of slots open each week just to have these conversations. And if you don't see an available slot that works for you, then also just feel free to email me to find a time in my calendar. I'm always happy to talk. Yes, Kevin Curry, thank you so much for sharing that. That's absolutely right. Midlands Aerospace Alliance, they've been absolutely phenomenal. Highly, highly recommend them. Highly recommend them. And so it's pretty much been an hour, in fact. Thank you for joining. Thank you for signing up. I don't take your presence for granted, and I'm absolutely blown away that, like I said, 240 of you saw fit to sign up, whether you've been able to join live, whether you are catching the replay, or whether you join the next live. I'm so grateful and glad for your presence. And so I hope you found this valuable. Do connect with me. If you need help in any of the areas I've spoken about, that's what I do for a living. That's what my team does for a living. We are entirely focused on doing this work for aerospace and aviation companies. Even if you have an existing marketing team, I work alongside marketing teams. I work alongside business development directors. It's not an either or, and so yes. And if you don't have those teams in-house, we provide those. So don't be shy. Connect with me, engage with my content, and spread the word if you found this valuable. Like, share, and definitely keen to continue to connect with you. That is great, Clive. I'm looking forward to seeing you. I will actually direct message you if I don't bump into you organically. And yes, indeed, see you at the Midlands Aerospace dinner and at Drone X. And if any of you are attending those events, do direct message me. Would love to have a coffee with you, and we can have a further conversation. Thank you for joining. Thank you for staying to the end. Your presence is very much appreciated, and I hope this is the first of many, many conversations. And who knows, maybe I'll do business with some of you as well. My inbox is always open. Please don't hesitate to reach out, and have a phenomenal day and rest of the week. Bye-bye.